everyone, Brad here with Mild Mannered EDC. Today we're going to do a review of the Kunwu Ronin. That's right. This is the second newest offering from Kunwu Knives. Really excited about this. Was a Kickstarter backer, as we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, I'm just really excited to see this knife hit the market and folks getting this knife and having it available. As I mentioned, it's their second offering. The Kunwu Orion was their very first offering, which was very well done for kind of a first knife out of the gate for a new company. So I was curious how they would do with their second offering here. And I got to tell you, a little bit of a spoiler alert here for the price and for the value. This is pretty darn great. I am really, really excited and have really been pleased with what I'm seeing, not only from Kunwu, but in their knives, which is sort of, you know, right, what speaks for the company, right, is how well their products end up turning out. So there you go. I will talk a little bit about Kunwu towards the end and just sort of my overall impressions, but for now, let's go ahead and kind of get this video underway, this review underway. We will do a classic mild-mannered review today of this knife. But first, let's start with some specs, as we always do here on the channel. So we've got a 3.38-inch blade on this Ronin. We've got a blade thickness here of 0.12 inches. We've got a handle length of 4.72 inches, a handle thickness of 0.45 inches. Overall, tip to tail, when it's all opened up here, of 8.11 inches and a weight, well, of 4.05 ounces. So there you go. Now let's do a couple size comparisons, and let's start with their first offering here, which was the Kunwu Orion. So there you go. You can kind of get a sense of what we're dealing with here. Kind of similar in size. Definitely a different design, but pretty similar there. Let's, how about up with a Benchmade bug out? There you go. Kind of get the sense there. And then how about a classic mild-mannered Swiss Army knife? There you go. So let's go ahead and get the mild-mannered review underway in earnest. When we do a classic mild-mannered review, we talk blade, then action, then scales and hardware, and then ergos and carry. So let's start with this blade, which is a very interesting little blade, actually. Well, 3.38 inches, not that small. Now it is S35VN, satin finished with a flat grind. Very, very interesting, you know, kind of Persian style blade with sort of that big, long trailing edge. I think that's what you call that, right? A trailing edge as it kind of sweeps up like that. Very, very nice. Now, as you can see, totally sterile on this side. Quite a bit of writing here on the backside. A couple of things. So Ronin, the name, then they've got what I assume is the model number here, case 702. Then you've got S35VN, the steel marking, and then first production, this was 22 out of 260. As I mentioned, this is a Kickstarter knife. They asked if Kickstarter backers wanted that. The majority did, so that's why it's on the knife. There you go. It doesn't bother me. I would have liked to maybe see the K702 and the S35VN maybe placed somewhere else. I don't mind the Ronin name there, but maybe putting those somewhere else wouldn't be a bad idea, because this is quite a beautiful blade, and that does kind of take up some space there. So there you go on that part of the blade. Now, a couple of things to mention here. We've got this fuller that really doesn't have much function other beyond aesthetics, and we'll talk about that a little bit in action. But yeah, it's more for aesthetics, and I like the aesthetic. I think it looks really good. And then the other thing they've done here is they've got, you'll notice there's no jimping on the top of this, as there are on some knives, actually many knives, but they've done a crowned spine, which means the very top back here of the knife, they've rounded off quite a bit, and I love that.
It's perfect. Look at it. It's fantastic.
I am a total sucker for the crown spine, so I really love that they've incorporated that into this knife. It's more common with Italian knives, it seems like to me. That seems to be a more common feature on those kind of knives, but I love seeing it here. It's just beautiful, and it creates just a lovely smooth surface up here, you know, where you don't have sharp edges, and just adds a really nice aesthetic. Now, the grind on this knife, the Orion also had a really good grind, a bit thicker. This has a much thinner grind, or comes down to a thinner edge. I can't give you exact, I don't have calipers and I need to get them, but But yeah, it's definitely thinner, hair popping sharp. I mean, really, really sharp. These grinds are done by hand on wet stones. Yeah, that's just, and it shows. I mean, it's just a very, very even grind. Little bit of a tiny bit of a smile here on the very bottom here at the choil. You know, not going to knock it too much, especially knowing it was done by hand. But yeah, there's, you know, maybe 1 millimeter, you know, and that maybe is perfect, but it's darn near so. It's quite good. So there you go. The blade on this, like I said, it's a really, really nice blade. Not a style I'm traditionally a big fan of. I'm not a huge Persian style kind of upswept blade kind of guy. I prefer a drop point or a clip point, but yeah, I think it works quite a bit for this knife. And interestingly, right, you've got sort of a lot going on here from the name Ronin, which is a Japanese sort of heritage that means like drifter or wanderer. It's part of I think the samurai tradition. You've got sort of this American Art Deco-y kind of look, at least according to their website. That's what they were going for here in the milling here, and I think that makes sense to me. And then you've got this sort of Persian style blade, which is interesting. So you've got kind of, and maybe you could even argue something a little Italian with that crown spine. So yeah, it's kind of some interesting cultural, you know, kind of picking from multiple cultures there to put this knife together, which I think is kind of cool in its own way. And it certainly comes together, I think, very, very beautifully. It's a very attractive knife. So that's blade. Let's talk action. So the action on this knife is very, very good. Quite authoritative. You can see that little guillotine action. Almost took the top of my thumb off there. See it bounce off my nail there. Yeah, that's just very, very nice how they've got the action. It is on ceramic ball bearings. Nothing to complain about there. And in fact, the Orion also, and I will continue to draw comparisons because they only have 2 knives in this company. The Orion also has a really, really nice fall shutty action. And that came more and more as I used it and wore it in. So I'm excited to see how this Ronin does that.
Freaking excited!
I will say, though, sort of overall, the acoustics and just the kind of quickness, I feel like the action is more refined on the Ronin. It's got a bit of a quicker, snappier, cleaner, crisper kind of action to it. And still quite a bit, you know, very, very smooth and quite fall shutty. Just maybe not quite as much as the Orion at this point, but I anticipate it will get there. So, you know, really nice detent. Yeah, not shake it. That was me trying to shake it out, by the way. That wasn't me just being weird. So yeah. A lot to like with this action. Now, the flipper tab is a bit pronounced. It's not the smallest flipper tab ever, but it does the job, and you can both sort of push actuate as well as doing sort of the light switch where you pull this way. Both work perfectly well. We've got a lockup here of about 35 to 40%. We've got no vertical or horizontal blade play or blade rock. Solid lockup. Fantastic. We do have an over travel stop and lock bar insert, which is great. And it actually comes with an extra one in the box, which is interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that on a knife. Pretty darn centered. If at all, it's maybe a hair off to the show side here, but yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. That's pretty darn good. So yeah, overall, this is an action I'm really liking, and I'm hoping to see it, see how it works itself in. Little side note here, if you'll allow me.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I was talking with my buddy Lewis over on Instagram, and he's South Central EDC. Go check him out. One of the things we were talking about was, he asked me, he said, do you disassemble the knives? And I said, well, I do usually, and almost always at some point in owning them. But when I buy a new knife or get something new from the factory, I don't disassemble before I do my review. And the reason is I want my review experience to be as fresh and accurate as it would be that you would also, it would be basically that I'm seeing and using and feeling the same knife that you would be if you were to buy this knife, right? So me going in, cleaning up the action, you know, doing any other things that I might do with it, fresh lube, you know, whatever. you know, not everybody disassembles their knives, and so I really want to try to give you a review that's as accurate as possible for so you'll know what to expect when you get the knife, basically. So that's sort of the way I approach it here on the channel. So there you go. That's the answer to that. Thanks for letting me do a little diatribe there. But good question, Lewis, and I appreciated it. So let's move on to scales and hardware. And let's just take a look at these scales for a second. I think these are done really, really beautifully. No sharp spots, but definitely, you know, lovely milling on both sides. You've got a titanium clip, titanium backspacer. I just really think they did a nice job. You've got that custom pivot there, flathead pan screws. Yeah. By the way, there are no screws on this side. 3 on this side, well, 4, I guess, if you count the lock bar insert, but 3 primary, pivot, and then these 3, all the primaries are all T8, which is great. No T6s on there, except for obviously this one, which is a little bit smaller, but for the main screws that you would be using. So I think that's pretty fantastic. Nice job, Kunwu, on that. Again, as I mentioned, you've got this titanium milled clip. You've got this sort of floating style type backspacer, or at least see-through backspacer. Interesting job here with the lanyard loop or lanyard spot, which I like a lot because it keeps it kind of keeps it out of the design, but it's still there if you want it. So I think that's a really nice way to do that. Also on this, I really like how let me see if I can get you a nice close up here. I really like how there you go, kind of put this little Kunwu logo. Instead of putting it on the blade, they put it back here, and I think that was just a nice touch. It's different. I haven't seen that on a lot of knives. But yeah, and just in general, the chamfering, everything's done. There's just all this is done beautifully, very smoothly. Really, really nice. You know, scales and hardware, pretty top-notch on this. So, ergos and carry. So, ergos, you know, this has really good ergos. I mean, you know, you're not really going to be choking up on this. So, if this is a knife you want to choke up on, it's probably not going to work for you. But, you know, from this standpoint, kind of traditional or doing this, something like that, it feels very good. Feels really good in hand. And, you know, I think one of the things that's, well, so anyways, ergos are good. Maybe a slight hot spot here off the front of this clip, but it's really, really not all that pronounced at all. And in fact, I've talked about this before, you know, hot spots and ergos, things like that, they're so subjective to the individual, unless you've really got a crazy knife with all kinds of, you know, finger spots and all kind, you know, whatever. But for these kind of knives, I mean, it just, yeah. And this one works very, very well. I think it fills the palm. I can get full 4 fingers. Everything's really comfortable. That crown spine is really comfortable there to kind of put your thumb there. You're not, you know, rubbing on some rough jimping or anything like that. They've put this little bit of a landing pad out in the back here. So yeah, the ergos are just quite good. Now, carry, this is another thing that I think feeds off of the ergos a little bit. This is a really well-balanced knife from the standpoint of blade to scale or to handle ratio. That's done really, really well. And in fact, you can see as this knife closes up, it's quite compact. I mean, you know, comparatively, you know, maybe, you know, to a bug out or something like that. I mean, yeah, it's right there. I mean, you know, it's a bit thicker, but it's not a ton thicker. So yeah, it carries really, really well. The other thing that they did really, really nicely was with this titanium milled clip. Kind of hard to see it, but I think that, well, sorry if I'm bumping. There you go. That's a good view. If you can kind of see where this hump is right here, it's basically a big rounded surface that kind of goes like this. And because it's then landing on smooth titanium, it really does create a nice milled clip aesthetic, but also one that's very, very functional. It comes in and out of the pocket great. It's not the deepest carry clip ever, right? I mean, you're going to have a little bit sticking out, but, you know, again, that's not too bad. So that doesn't bother me all that much at all. So the kind of final thing I do want to mention, doing this and even pressing hard, even in this landing pad area where it's a little wider, you can't touch the blade. But if you really, you know, especially like your pinky, jam it in there, there's enough room to definitely touch the blade. Are you going to be able to cut yourself? I don't know. Probably. I don't think so. And frankly, definitely not just from casual like this, or if it's in your pocket and you're sort of running your hand along it, where I have cut myself before. It's not going to do that to you at all. No way. It's not even in the territory of what I would call like scary or maybe a little off-putting. It's really not that at all, but it is there if you really jam your finger in, and it's something I always look for, and so something I wanted to tell you. So it is there, but yeah, it's nothing that certainly nothing I'm going to worry about. There you go. Let me put it that way. So there we go. That's kind of the full mild-mannered review on this Ronin. I really, really like it. I think this is a fantastic second offering from, and let's just put both of them out here, second offering from Kunwu. They're really doing a nice job. When you consider that this knife cost me, as a Kickstarter backer, $109. What? Yeah, that's right. $109 for S35VN. All of this titanium and the attention to detail and just sort of overall look, fit, and finish. I think that's pretty darn compelling. Now, the question is, oh, and by the way, you can buy these on the website. They are available now for the price of $139, which I still feel like is a very good deal. The question is, can Kunwu continue to offer that type of value on these kind of knives? Will they be able to continue to do that? I know that's their goal. I know that's their plan. If they can, if they are successful with that, if they keep delivering this level of quality at these prices, that's I don't use this phrase very often, but I would say that that's a potential game changer for the industry, because we've seen a lot of companies start out at really aggressive price points, and then they just creep up over time to the point where they're just like basically every other knife, and they're kind of in the middle of the pack at that point. So, I hope Kunwu, and I think that's their mission, is to bring you this high level quality at prices that are really accessible to a lot of people. So if they can keep doing that, that would be fantastic. I know they've got another offering that's getting ready to be queued up, and I'm really excited to see that. Check out their Instagram. I think they've got some pics of it up there. But yeah, I'm really hoping that that's where Kunwu can go, because if they can sustain this and keep delivering this type of design, uniqueness, beauty, refinement, and at a value, almost a value type proposition here, that's just a real winning recipe. So very well done, Kunwu. You should be really proud of both offerings. I love my Orion quite a bit. The Ronin I definitely am enjoying, and I'm really like having in my pocket, and it's going to be staying in my collection for a good long time, probably forever, because it's that first run and it's kind of special, yada yada. So there you go. So that's my review here of the Ronin. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, please, give it a like, consider subscribing. It means a lot to me, helps me to continue to know what to, do for content and to continue to do all this. If you've got comments, if there's things you don't like that I'm doing, put them down there as well. I love to read those, and, I'm always interested in constructive feedback. So with that, though, and most importantly, stay safe out there. Be mild-mannered to one another. And all the best. 一人ぼっちの夜